cold Atlantic wind moves across the water at the entrance of New York Harbor. The tide shifts, restless and powerful, squeezing between two land masses that for centuries stood apart, Brooklyn on one side, Staten Island on the other. Ships from around the world pass through this narrow channel known simply as the Narrows. Today, above those waters, steel towers rise nearly 700 feet into the sky, holding up one of the most iconic suspension bridges on Earth, the Verrazzano-Narrows Bridge. But this giant of steel and cable did not always exist. Its story begins long before the first bolt was tightened, long before construction crews arrived, long before the idea of a bridge even felt possible. In 1524, an Italian explorer named Giovanni da Verrazzano sailed into these very waters. He was searching for a western route to Asia under the French flag. Instead, he discovered one of the most strategic natural harbors in the world. As his wooden ship drifted through the Narrows, he saw forests, open land, and vast opportunity. He could not have imagined that centuries later, a steel monument would carry hundreds of thousands of vehicles daily across the same passage. For more than 300 years after Verrazzano's voyage, the Narrows remained a natural divide. Small boats and ferries transported people and goods between Brooklyn and Staten Island. The waters could be calm and beautiful, reflecting the sky like glass, or violent and unpredictable, churning with winter storms and Atlantic winds. Travel was dependent on weather, tide, and patience. By the late 19th century, New York City was exploding in growth. Manhattan had become a global financial center. Brooklyn was developing rapidly, yet Staten Island remained relatively rural and lightly populated. Ferries connected it to the rest of the city, but transportation was slow and inconvenient. During harsh winters, ice could disrupt crossings. During storms, service was delayed. The idea of a fixed crossing began to surface in planning discussions as early as the 1880s, but the engineering challenges were enormous. The Narrows was not a quiet river. It was one of the busiest maritime gateways in America. Any bridge would need to allow the tallest ships in the world to pass underneath without obstruction. That meant the deck would have to be extremely high above the water. The channel was also deep, with powerful currents carving into the seabed. Foundations would need to be sunk far below the surface into unstable soil. The scale alone intimidated engineers of the era. In the early 20th century, suspension bridge technology began to advance rapidly. Engineers were pushing boundaries across the United States. One of the most influential bridge designers of the time was Othmar Ammann. Ammann believed that suspension bridges could span distances previously considered impossible. He had already worked on major projects, including the George Washington Bridge, which opened in 1931 and connected Manhattan to New Jersey. Still, building across the Narrows was different. The span required would need to exceed all previous records. Funding would be massive. Political will would be essential. That political will arrived in the form of one of the most powerful infrastructure figures in New York history, Robert Moses. Moses believed highways and bridges were the future. He saw automobiles as the backbone of modern urban life. To him, a bridge across the Narrows was not just a convenience, it was a necessity. It would unlock Staten Island for development and complete a highway network that could circle the outer boroughs of New York City. By the 1950s, post-World War II America was booming. Suburban living was expanding. Car ownership was rising dramatically. Staten Island, still the least developed borough, became attractive to families seeking quieter neighborhoods. But transportation limitations slowed growth. Moses pushed aggressively for the bridge project, and in 1959 construction officially began. The first visible signs of change were the foundations. Engineers built massive caissons, watertight chambers, and sank them deep into the seabed. Workers labored under extreme pressure conditions to secure the base of what would become two enormous towers. The work was dangerous. Strong currents, deep waters, and underwater excavation created constant risk. Gradually, steel towers began to rise above the water. Each tower would reach approximately 693 feet high. From a distance, they looked like skeletal giants growing out of the harbor. Piece by piece, steel sections were lifted into place by cranes. Workers balanced high above the water on narrow beams, securing bolts with precision. Safety standards of the era were not as advanced as today, making the work even more perilous. Then came the cables, the defining feature of any suspension bridge. Thousands upon thousands of individual steel wires were spun together to form the massive main cables. These cables would carry the weight of the entire roadway. The spinning process required incredible accuracy. Workers moved back and forth across the span, weaving strands into place until two colossal cables stretched between the towers like taut steel ropes. An extraordinary detail emerged as the towers were completed. Because the Earth is curved, the tops of the towers are slightly farther apart than their bases, about 1/5 inches. It is a subtle but powerful reminder that this bridge was built on a planetary scale. By 1964, after 5 years of intense construction, the bridge was ready. On November 21, thousands gathered to witness the opening. The central span measured 460 feet, longer than any suspension bridge span in the world at that time. It immediately broke records. Cars began crossing in steady streams. Staten Island was no longer separated by tide and wind. It was directly linked by steel. The bridge was officially named in honor of Giovanni da Verrazzano, though due to a clerical error, his name was misspelled with a single for decades. Only in 2018 was the spelling formally corrected to match the explorer's original name. Traffic volumes grew rapidly, faster than expected. What planners thought would be sufficient capacity soon proved inadequate. By 1969, a second level was added beneath the original deck, transforming the structure into a double-deck bridge. This expansion significantly increased traffic flow and reinforced the bridge's importance within Interstate 278. The effect on Staten Island was immediate and dramatic. Residential construction surged, new neighborhoods formed, shopping centers and schools followed. The borough's population increased steadily in the decades after the bridge opened. The once semi-isolated island became integrated into the metropolitan rhythm of New York City. Yet the bridge was not just about transportation. It became a visual symbol, a monumental gateway to New York Harbor. Ships sailing toward Manhattan passed beneath its towering structure. At sunrise, its cables glow orange against the Atlantic horizon. At night, lights trace its silhouette against the dark sky. Every year, the bridge plays host to one of the most iconic sporting events in the world, the New York City Marathon. Tens of thousands of runners gather before dawn on Staten Island. When the race begins, they surge forward across the upper deck in a wave of motion, the skyline waiting in the distance. For many, that crossing is one of the most unforgettable moments of the marathon. Structurally, the bridge was designed to withstand extreme forces. Engineers studied wind behavior carefully. Past bridge disasters elsewhere in history had demonstrated the destructive potential of aerodynamic instability. As a result, the Verrazzano-Narrows Bridge incorporated deep stiffening trusses and a heavy deck structure to resist oscillation. It was built to endure Atlantic storms and hurricane-force winds. Over the decades, modernization projects have strengthened and updated the bridge. Road surfaces have been replaced, lighting systems upgraded to energy-efficient LEDs, cables inspected and maintained, security measures enhanced in the post-2001 era. Despite constant exposure to saltwater air, which accelerates corrosion, maintenance teams work continuously to preserve the structure. Today, the bridge carries well over 200,000 vehicles on peak days. It remains one of the longest suspension bridges in the United States and one of the most important links in New York's transportation network. More than half a century after its opening, it continues to function not only as infrastructure, but as a symbol of ambition and connection. And yet, its story is still unfolding, shaped by traffic patterns, climate challenges, urban development, and evolving engineering technology.